When I attempted to take my own life a few years ago, I didn't realize at the time, but I didn't actually want to be dead. I thought I did. All I wanted was for the pain to stop. I need to give you an understanding of who I am in this conversation. I am a suicide survivor. I am a carer for a direct loved one who has survived a suicide attempt. I've lived with suicidal ideation myself, and I've also lost people, particularly one person that we're going to speak about today. I didn't understand when I attempted to take my life that the pain that I was feeling was not going to end with my end. It would linger on in the people around me. I want to talk about that today. It's a hard discussion and it's a difficult discussion, but for somebody that's living with mental illness, that's living with suicidal ideations, suicidal thoughts or behavior, they are essentially being selfish. Not selfish in the way of, oh, it's all about me, but selfish if they can't see beyond their own pain. So that's what we're going to dive into today. Let's hook in and see what happens, yeah? Welcome to Mark My Words. Mark My Words is the story of my journey from a place where I was shattered to where I could live again. I'm always cautious when I talk about suicide. It's a subject that has been taboo in our society. One example of that is when you hear of the death of a celebrity, you will often hear that there was no foul play or there was no other people involved in the death. They just won't come out and say, look, such and such killed themselves. It's a tragedy, but that's what they did. Because we're afraid of the conversation. I want to share from my own experience. So you might be looking at this and go, well, this says this and this says, and no, this is what I've seen in my own experience. As I mentioned at the top, I'm a suicide survivor. It's quite miraculous that I'm still here. I had a psychotic episode and attempted to take my own life. There was a realization that I had on the way to the hospital, though, and it was a realization that hadn't occurred to me before that point in time. See, I thought I wanted an end to everything. And that wasn't true. And I didn't realize that until I was in the ambulance being taken to hospital. I didn't want to die. I didn't want to be in an urn or in the ground. I just wanted the pain to stop. And in fact, all I wanted to do was be at home with my wife. That might seem like a stunningly stupid realization to come to, but you don't understand how powerful it was for me. I was so caught up in my own pain, the own idea that nothing would ever change or get better or improve. So it was better in my eyes just to end things. It wasn't until I lost a good mate of mine, his name was Daniel, that I fully realized what my death would have left behind. And it was staggering for me when I first figured it out. Because when my mate Daniel died, at first, of course, there's disbelief because it came out of nowhere. Then there was guilt on my behalf. Why didn't he reach out to me? Why didn't he trust me? Why didn't he think that I was a person to come to? Well, at the time, I didn't talk about suicide. I never spoke about it. And if I mentioned it to people, it was just a little blip in my story. Well, when I lost my mate Daniel, you got to understand, I've spoken about Daniel before. Daniel was better than me. Daniel was kinder than me. Daniel was special. He was going to make a difference in the world, in whatever he did. Now, I met Daniel when I was working at a community radio station. I was paid to bring in new people to be announcers. And Daniel showed up at every event. It was quite funny, actually. He'd stand in the background, always pleasant, always excited to be there, had this excited look on his face, but incredibly shy and unwilling to put himself out there because of that shyness. So one day I was talking to him and he'd been there like at least a dozen events, which is a lot of events for one person to be at. And I said, mate, do you want to come on air with me? And he did one of these. And I'm going to try and translate this for people that aren't watching on video, because he did that shy smile and kind of shook his head like, yes, no, I couldn't. I don't want to. And so I made up an excuse. I said, look, I am really exhausted. I need somebody in the studio with me to bounce off to help keep me fresh. So he came in. It turns out he was a natural. Once he learned a few of the basics, he got it, he enjoyed it, he started to love doing it, ended up creating his own show, ended up doing a bunch of incredible stuff. This is a guy that I mentored. I got to know him. I got to love him as a friend and as somebody that I was looking forward to seeing what he would do in his life. I felt privileged to be a part of whatever his journey was. Now, the thing about Daniel is he was kind beyond measure. I don't doubt that if he met somebody that needed the shirt off his back, he would actually give it to them. I've got a shirt at home. You take my shirt. It's okay. And if you knew Daniel, if you knew how shy he was about his body and who he is, what I'm saying there is monumental. He would put himself into discomfort if it was going to help somebody else. And Daniel ended up taking his own life. For Daniel, I hope his pain is done. Let's be honest. We can believe what we believe about the afterlife, but we don't know. We'll only know when we're gone. Believe what you want, it's all good, but we'll only 100% know when we're gone. The trail of tears that Daniel has left behind him is commensurate with who he was as a person. His family knew he was special. They knew he was going places. Everybody that worked with him at the radio station knew that he was something special. So when he died, it was a tragedy beyond belief. It was a tragedy that, you could put 10,000 people in a room, and if you were to say who would be the last person in the room to end their life, I would have picked Daniel. Now, the thing about Daniel is that with this generous, loving nature of his, I know for a fact, 100% believe this, that if he knew the pain that he'd inflicted on his family members, his friends, his acquaintances, he would be devastated. How do I know this? My son came to me a little while ago, and he knows that I attempted to take my life when he was very young, 2 or 3 years old. And he came to me and he said, Dad, you tried to take your life when you were young. You didn't use those kind of words, but that was the gist of the conversation. I said, yeah, mate, I did. He goes, Dad, I have to know something. And of course, I took a deep breath. I was like, okay, I don't know what he's going to say, but lay it on me. And he says, was it my fault? My son had been living with this question in his mind since the first time he found out I attempted to take my life. And then in his teenage years, he has to ask himself the question, was it my fault? Imagine what his life would have been like if I wasn't here to answer that question. How different his reality would be. He would have been surrounded by a family that loves him. My family, my wife's family, they would have surrounded them with love. But still, the question would remain in his mind. I know that Daniel would feel guilt because I feel guilt for what I did to my family and friends with just an attempt of suicide. I didn't actually think that this was a controversial statement. It's not one that you hear often or at all, in my experience, because we're afraid to talk about it. Now, if I had have known this information before I attempted to take my life, would I have still made the attempt? We'll never know. I don't know. Could I have understood it? Absolutely not. Would it have made a difference in my behavior? Maybe. If I knew that, you know, when I attempted to take my life, it was about protecting other people. Like, yeah, my life was hopeless. My life had ended. I had no hope. But it was about the thought that I was hurting the other people around me, that I was making their lives hell. That was probably the most predominant thought of all my suicidal ideation. Mark, you're useless, you're hopeless, you're hurting everyone around you. You're making their lives worse. I will never know if I could have said something to Daniel to alter his thinking. Would my direct presence at the time have made a difference? All I know is this. When I got the phone call that Daniel had killed himself, I was on a cruise. I was in the middle of the ocean and I was having ridiculous fun with my family. Then I get this call. If Daniel had have called me and said, Mark, I'm about to attempt to take my life, I would have got off the boat at the next port. I would have flown back to Australia. I would have driven straight to far north Queensland where he was living. On the phone the whole time. Mate, I'll be there soon. I will see you in a day. I'll see you in 5 hours. I'll see you in 2 hours. I'll see you in an hour. I didn't done anything. And that's part of the guilt, is why didn't he know that I would do anything? I don't make this statement that pain lingers on after your suicide to be controversial or to hurt anyone or to upset anyone. And in fact, I did upset someone when I wrote this down on a Facebook post. They got very upset at me for their own reasons, and I don't want to go into that. But that's why I want to talk to you today from my experience, both before, after, and ongoing. Now, Daniel died. I can't even tell you how many years ago it was. But the pain is often as fresh today as it was the day I found out. One of the hardest conversations I ever had to have with my brother, a veteran who went to Afghanistan 5 or 6 times, came back with PTSD. One of the hardest conversations I've had to say to tell him is that I couldn't go to his funeral. So we've almost lost him to suicide 5 or 6 times. And he got really mad at me, because his question was along the lines of, what would you say at my funeral? And I said, well, mate, I don't know that I could go to your funeral. And it obviously hurt him. He said, why is that? I said, because losing you would be so devastating. I don't even know if I could get out of bed, let alone go to your funeral. Of course, at the time, this had no impact. But I was to find out years later that conversation had played on his mind at times when he was about to make an attempt. He thought, I can't hurt my brother that much that he couldn't even come to my funeral. If you're caring for someone that has threatened suicide or is living with suicide, I don't know how you can do it. Certainly don't do it when they're in crisis. If they're coming to you, they're in crisis. Oh, I'm going to attempt to. That would destroy me if you did. It's going to have no impact. But when they're doing okay, if you just let them know how much they mean to you, how much them just being around, how much you appreciate them fighting the fight. Because it's not easy fighting suicidal ideation, because nothing else seems to present an option for you to stop the pain, apart from ending everything. If you thank them for making the effort to stay with you and potentially letting them know losing you would be one of the worst things that ever happened to me. My daughter attempted suicide, and thankfully she was in so much pain, physical pain afterwards, that whenever we talk about it now, she's like, I'm never going through that again. So to her, suicide is off the table. But the other reason, and she said this very, very clearly to me once, is I don't want to hurt mum the way I've hurt her already. My wife admitted to me about 2 years after my daughter's suicide attempt that every morning she would crack open my daughter's door and make sure that she was breathing, because that's how she found her the first time. She just went in to kiss her goodbye on her way to work. She knew she'd be asleep, but she just wanted to see her. I know there are times when my wife can't walk past her room without getting affected. This is 3, 4, 5 years later. The pain of suicide lingers on after you're gone. It hurts the people that you love, the people that you care for, and it hurts people that you don't even think could be hurt by your death. Suicide has a catastrophic impact on a community. We went to a funeral a few years ago for a young man that ended his life. And again, this was another exceptional young man. And I don't say that lightly. If you know me, I'm not one to blow smoke up people and tell them they're amazing when they're not. But this kid was exceptional, and he ended his own life. And the funeral was so devastating because they didn't address the suicide. They didn't let people grieve about it. And every person that spoke, every conversation was covered in this, just this sense of guilt and anger and frustration. A suicide funeral is a horrible, horrible experience. Because when somebody dies of a car accident or by a disease, there's nothing you can do about that. It just, something happened. But when somebody takes their life, you can't help but think, what could I have done differently? Was it me that was the missing piece in their story that may have saved their lives? And it's not a rational thought. It's completely irrational. I do it with Daniel. What could I have done for him? How could I possibly have known? He lived 2,000 kilometers away from me. How could I ever have known how much pain he was in? And yet, I still think about what should I have done? Why didn't I do it? With my daughter, there's still that anger and guilt and frustration that she would have done something like this to me and her mum. The pain of suicide lingers after you're gone. It's a sad fact, but it's a true fact. Maybe, just maybe, something that might affect your thinking. Who are you hurting with your suicide? Not who are you helping, but who are you hurting? Whose life is going to be worse with you not in it? And I guarantee you, I promise you, you have no idea how many people there are around you that if they knew or found out that you had chosen to take your life, it would hurt them till the day I die. I will never, ever forget Daniel. I'll never, ever forget his face. The guilt, I challenge it. The pain, I try and soothe it. Maybe he's in a better place. Maybe he's not in pain anymore, and that's a good thing. But it will never go away. Neither will the guilt that I have for what I put my family through when I attempted to take my life. Today was a toughie. If you made it all the way through, thank you. This was not an easy conversation. I want to thank you for listening. My favorite expression, like, share, and subscribe. I guarantee I'm not going to start calling everybody guys. Just that ridiculous podcast trope. But I very much look forward to speaking to you next week. Bye for now. Thank you for listening to Mark My Words. I'd like to thank my producer, Meredith Brosnan, and also Torian, Kevin, and Lorraine. And I can't forget the band Adelaide, who allows us to use their song as our theme.